Hey, Megan.
Hey Sarah, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing great. I have a fun check-in in honor of our amazing guest that we're having on today, Leah from Mamavation. I've been so involved in her Mamavation community and just reading her website every day and looking at her social media, and it's so informative. But a couple weeks ago, I decided to get rid of all my hair aerosol products, which was really hard to do because I
Yeah.
used a lot of them. And I know we have similar hair. So I wanted to share, I found this incredible hairspray and it is available at Whole Foods and also through Thrive Market. And it's the Giovanni Hold hairspray. And it's in like a little spritz. So there's no aerosol and it's all clean ingredients. And I didn't have great expectations for it. I kind of was like, my hair is just going to suffer as I transition to cleaner products. And it's incredible. It works great. Yeah,
Wow.
so I'm using it on myself and even my girls a little bit when I need to put some of their flyaways down. And it's fantastic. So it's the Giovanni Hold Hair Spritz, and we're not affiliated with them at all. This is a genuine recommendation for a cleaner product.
Yay, that's cool. And for the application, is it going on smoothly? Like you don't see
Yeah.
clumps? That would be my concern
No,
without
it's
aerosol.
yeah, no, it's just like a little spray, a little pump spray, and you don't actually even need as much product. I felt like aerosol really wastes a lot of product too, because so much is being pushed out at
Oh,
once. You
yeah.
really only need just a little bit. Yeah, it's great. You should check it
Interesting.
out.
Yeah, I'll try
Yeah.
it. I need some new
How
hairspray.
how are you this week?
Oh, I'm good. I do have to come clean about something though on air.
Oh
Are you
no.
ready?
Uh-oh.
So a few episodes ago, we went to go see the Barbie movie and we said, this is not appropriate for our kids. Well, I did say that. And then I had three little girls begging me to go see the Barbie movie. And I kept saying, no, 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 it's not appropriate for you. And then my 8-year-old goes, oh, why? Because she has thoughts of death. Who cares? And just starts laughing. And I was like, okay. That was my major hang up about that movie for them. It was pretty funny. So they ended up, I took them, I went with my husband, we took them to go see the Barbie movie and they loved it. They all absolutely
Oh.
loved it. And they didn't really have any hangups with the thoughts of death part of that movie. And the other stuff that was like maybe a little bit more adult went just straight over their heads. So I think I have this sweet spot age wise where like they didn't quite get all the jokes and that's totally
Yeah.
fine, but they loved it. So I have to just revise my statement and say, look at the developmental level and personality of your kid and decide if this is
Yes.
appropriate or not, because it ended up being just fine for mine, who are 8, 6,
I
and 3.
I
So
love that you have to come clean about this.
yeah.
I'm like, was there like a paparazzi shot of you at the movie? And I'm
Someone
like,
got a picture of me.
Megan.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm so
Oh.
famous. Yeah, it was weighing on my conscience because I was like, oh, it was so kind of like, oh, this is not appropriate. And then it
Yeah.
ended up my kids were just fine. So yeah.
Well, you know what? And I think the learning here is that a generalized statement for any child doesn't necessarily apply, right? Like children are so different. I still think I wouldn't take my girls based on their age and development and to see the movie, but every child is so specific and so different. And you just have to make the call for your child, which is
Yeah,
that's being a parent.
that is being a parent. There's more exceptions than there are rules to kids. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well, I love that you came clean.
It's off my conscience.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone to Platinum Perspective, the podcast about beauty, travel, luxury, and more. I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And I'm Megan. Sarah and I are best friends who put the work in to get the most out of life so you don't have to.
Today, we are so thrilled to have Leah Segedie from Mamavation here with us. We are part of her Mamavation community and have quoted her extensive research on what we refer to as PFAS, PFAS, in our episodes. Leah is an incredibly accomplished activist, and she is a huge inspiration to us. She's a consumer watchdog, author, community organizer, and strategist. She's the author of Green Enough, Eat Better, Live Cleaner, Be Happier, all without driving your family crazy. The book that helps families make safer and greener product choices. Leah helps women make safer consumer choices for their families through her research shared on her Mamavation site. Mamavation empowers women through eco wellness. Content from her site reaches millions of American women annually and helps them to avoid the pitfalls of hormone disrupting chemicals inside everyday products through the investigations of every aisle of a retail store. But inside the Mamavation community, Leah brings excitement and humor to serious topics, which make them easier to remember and digest. Fans automatically become more knowledgeable about marketing tricks and toxic pitfalls. She was named Mom of the Year by Shape Magazine, woo, and PFAS Hunter by Consumer Reports. Welcome, Leah.
That was an amazing intro. Thank you so much.
You're pretty impressive.
I'm like, where is this lady? Is she here? I want to meet her. I always forget about, my mother tells me to write everything down because I do things and don't celebrate it like everybody else does. And so to hear them, like I'm reminded, oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, that's right. That was like 10 years ago. Oh yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, it's nice to hear it repeated back to you.
It just keeps me humble though. Yeah. My memory keeps me humble.
Yeah, well, welcome, Leah. So we are going to start with our rapid fire segment. And this is I know. Get excited. So this is a segment where we ask you some questions and then we just want to hear your very brief answers to those questions. And then later on in the episode, if you want to clarify or add on, we can do that.
Okay.
So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I hope.
What are your top 3 household items to switch out from conventional to something clean?
Okay. I'm a woman, so I'm going to talk from a female perspective. Makeup, for sure, 100% I would look into because that is a daily wearer. Dental floss. If you are using dental floss, I would definitely swap that out. That's a big one, especially for PFAS, what we're talking about before. And then I would say your cookware and what you're storing your food in. Those are the 3 things that I would start on right away.
Oh, wow. I never knew about the floss. We'll get into that. That's interesting. Okay. What is one conventional item you would never allow in your home?
I get made fun of this. It's soda. We don't allow soda in the house. We never have.
Oh, wow.
I don't either.
It's been the rule since day one. And, my family has tried to sneak it in before. And I've always been like, oh, found that outside. Like I literally would put it outside. So I have allowed Italian soda in the house, without the high fructose corn syrup, of course. But soda has kind of been like the rule. Why would you drink that? And we just don't allow it in the house.
Oh, goodness. So no Diet Coke. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? It's the amount of Diet Cokes that I have drank in my lifetime. I'm not even going to try counting it because, I'm thinking of like when I was a kid, what was I drinking? Starting at 16 years old, Diet Coke from, I don't even want to think about how many cans. Like, no, because you know what? It's a better future for the kids and they're not going to be drinking it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, last question. What makeup brand do you personally use?
I use so many. And I test them first and then I use them. So the ones that I'm typically wearing is Beauty Counter, Crunchy, 100% Pure, Pure Haven. They have like mascara and little things. And then there's 2 like big brands, not big brands, but kind of like more indie that I like that I've also tested. And the owners are super amazing. That's Fit Glow Beauty. And Sappo, Sappo. Those 2 brands are amazing. And those are just regular brands. They're not MLMs. So those are the ones that I typically go to. And nice. Why do I wear so much MLM makeup? And for my purposes, it's because when I go to an MLM and say, hey, I found something, they fix it right away, like lightning fast. And when I go to a brand... multi-level marketing. Yeah. And so for my purposes of testing PFAS, the MLMs are the fastest at fixing things because they have so much more to prove than the bigger brands, you know? And so they're easier to work with for me. So when I find things and I go to them and I'd be like, hey, I found something, they're testing it lightning fast. They're pulling it from the shelves very fast. They're doing all those things very fast. And so I support them behind the scenes because of how much they care. And I can tell how much brands care because when I come calling, it's either you got it or you don't. And I can tell, and they do. So the ones that I support care.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So of the ones you pointed out, I know that Beauty Counter is an MLN.
Yep.
MLM.
MLM.
What other ones there? Yeah.
Crunchy
which
is
other ones
one.
there?
Crunchy is another
okay.
one.
Okay.
Pure Haven
good
is
to
another
know.
one. I spent so many years like evaluating them from afar, and then I just was just like, I'm just gonna do work with these three. So I do work with Crunchy, Pure Haven, and Beauty Counter, but that was after extensive testing of their products. And then I was just like, okay, we're now going to sell your stuff because you are going to be paying for our PFAS testing. So all the Beauty Counter and all the Crunchy and all the Pure Haven that we sell through Mamavation goes directly back to testing for PFAS in makeup and all kinds of other things. So it's kind of like a, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I
That's
love
how
that.
that's how
I
I've done
love
it
that.
to make it happy for everybody. Yeah.
That's great to know. Okay. Well, with that, let's segue into Leah, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into this incredible work that you do and creating Mamavation?
Well, I didn't think I was going to do this when I was in college, and this was the last thing that I thought I was going to get myself into. And to be quite honest, I was a political operative when I graduated. So I worked for the California State Assembly for different elected officials, and I was the person that would show up to all the rubber chicken lunches and dinners, hand out awards, give speeches, and they'd say bye, on behalf of the elected official. That was my job for a really long time. What started to happen in my life was it started getting really, really real. People started dying of cancer. My father was exposed to asbestos, which is a cancer. Mesothelioma is the cancer he died from, and it's from asbestos exposure. And so you can see how my father being exposed to a chemical that most people didn't really understand, and it was kind of like in everything hidden, how that experience, you can see what I'm doing today, because today what I'm doing is I'm working on and intrigued by those exact chemicals that are persistent and problematic that are not necessarily on the ingredient label. And I am searching for those things. I am sending those things products off to the lab, looking for those things. It started when my father died many, many years ago. And my father died when I was pregnant with my first son. And it was such an incredible experience, not in a great way, but I stopped working and I took care of my father when he had cancer. And my dad said to me, I'm going to make it to see my grandson. I'm going to make it. And my mother didn't tell my dad that he had 6 months to live because she didn't want him to know. He ended up living for like 11, 12 months, and he wanted to see his grandson.
Wow.
And that was what kept him going. And so my first pregnancy, right? The first time I gave birth, my dad was in the room. I know that sounds weird. He was behind my head. He couldn't see anything. He was on, he had,
oh my
you
gosh.
could hear, he sounded like Darth Vader because he was on a breathing machine, and my father-in-law was outside and my dad kept saying, stay behind the curtain, Ken. It was like my mom and my mother-in-law, my mother's a registered nurse. No big deal. My mother-in-law is not. She's a preschool teacher, but everybody was in the room for the birth. It was.
Oh my gosh.
I know it sounds weird, but it was a family ordeal. Everybody was really looking forward to this moment. And so when I gave birth to my first son, it was just like so much, there was so many emotions about it. But I was never pregnant. Like I didn't have that, I'm growing this baby in my belly. And I never had that feeling because I was losing somebody. So all I could think about was losing my father. I couldn't think about this child that I was bringing into the world. And I didn't even think about that until my dad died about 3 months later. And of course I lost it. I completely lost it. Screaming, yelling, the whole 9 yards. They had to come, and it's really hard when it's asbestos because they have to treat the body like a murder. So they come in and they zip them up in the thing and they take them away
Oh.
and they evaluate them because asbestos is categorized in a way that they have to evaluate it in a very like they got to take them down to the coroner and they had to do an autopsy and they have to report on it to the state and all that stuff. And it was just a mess and it was not fun. So from that moment on, we had other relatives dying. My uncle died, my aunt died. I had another uncle who died, and it was just people were just dropping left and right from cancer. And that experience just really impacted me, and it made me singularly focused on wellness, health, and families, particularly families and supporting families with decisions to keep everybody healthier. And that's just where my heart is. You know, that's where it comes from. And so people are like, why PFAS? And I'm all like, well, why asbestos? Asbestos is hidden. Nobody sees it. You know, that's why I'm particularly interested in things like phthalates, bisphenols, PFAS, DDT. These are things that, you know, are hidden in the world and I'm looking for them, but they're persistent and they're really problematic. And so someone's got to do it. So I just say to the universe, thank you for giving me this crazy obsession because I get to serve so many women. And that's how I see it.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredibly purpose-driven life you've created. That I'm sure your father would be so proud. That what
He
an
is proud.
incredible story behind it.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
That's amazing. Well, having a background in science, I'm deeply interested in endocrine disruptors, especially PFAS, which you just mentioned, known as forever chemicals. We've quoted your research a few times on our episodes in the past. Wondering if you can just share more about PFAS, what it is, and why it's dangerous.
Okay. So when we say PFAS, we're actually referring to P and polyperfluorinated chemicals. So these are the chemicals that are the water resistant, oil resistant, and stain resistant chemicals. If you've heard of Gore-Tex clothing, you've heard of PFAS. If you've heard of Teflon pans, you have heard of PFAS. If you've heard of Stainmaster carpet, you have heard of PFAS. Now, these chemicals were amazing. They do amazing things. They help us in our modern world. But what we didn't realize was how incredibly persistent they are, which means they don't go away. And when I say that, there is this category of chemicals. It's not just one chemical. There's over 15,000 of these chemicals now. There used to be 12,000. Now it's just such a monster to hold on to and hug. It's one of the reasons why I do very particular testing, which I'll cover later in the story when we're talking. But the most important thing to know is there's 15,000 of these chemicals. So don't think of them as just being one, think of them as lots, right? PFOA is one of those chemicals. That's a legacy chemical that barely any brands are using on purpose. When you find PFOA, it's probably in water or it's probably in something that has been contaminated a while ago that is still in the environment. Now, the most important thing to know about not only is the persistence is when it's in your body, based on what type of PFAS it is, it can take from weeks to decades to get out of your body. And if it's some of the more legacy chemicals that we understand, we're talking up to 40 years to get out of your body. So some of these chemicals will never leave your body. So now you understand why I was concerned with asbestos. I'm definitely concerned with PFAS. So the other part is the ubiquitousness. So they didn't realize how persistent it was when they created it. It was kind of like, oops, we made a mess. So over the decades and decades that they've been creating these chemicals, they haven't gone anywhere. So they're ubiquitous in the environment. They're everywhere. They're in manufacturing. They're in your homes. They're not necessarily there on purpose. And they're in ranges, high levels, low levels. The problem is we don't know. So, you know, it is something where they have been dubbed forever chemicals for a reason. They're ubiquitous, they're persistent, and they're highly toxic. So when we're talking about toxicity, Linda Birnbaum is one of my main advisors, and she helps me quite a bit when we do these. But so she has given me a list of what I can talk about that is sound science for all of the things that it's been linked to. That is done infinity times. So we understand that this is sound science. So we understand that PFAS reduces your immune system. Starting from pregnancy to adults, it can reduce your immune system in any person. Metabolic diseases like obesity and diabetes. So this chemical can make you fat. So you can be
Oh, wow.
exercising, you've been eating all the right foods, you're doing keto, you're doing paleo, you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, and it's not working. Sometimes it could be PFAS. And you can get a test and
Wow.
find out how much PFAS you have in your body. If you want to, you absolutely can. And I can help you with that a little later. But I have done it. So even now I want people to understand this is really important. I avoid things like crazy, but I have been tested and I have PFOS in my body, and a lot of it. And I'm not weird. I'm not unique. I'm normal. You know what I'm saying? So that means everybody will have this in their body
Yes.
to varying degrees based on what they've been exposed to. We don't really know. The problem is we can't test all of those 15,000 chemicals. We can only test about 25 to 40 in blood right now. So there is a limitation. So in my mind, when people say PFAS free, PFOA free, I think, really? You know what I'm saying? So in my mind, try to lower things. In my mind, I am never removing everything 100%. And I think when we talk about that, that's really important for us to understand. This is not something we can get rid of. This is something we can only manage. This is where I need your audience to pull into that space in their heart and say, okay, I understand. This is emerging science. There is no answer. And what I'm going to do is try to lower it. I'm not going to try to remove it. And I am going to try to do this without freaking out. That's the hard part. But
Yeah.
we're going to have to try to do all those things. Okay. So reduced vaccination response is another issue. So for people who are getting a vaccination, your vaccine will work less in your body because it's impacted your immune system. And because your natural immunity is not working the way it should, your vaccines will not work the way they should. How do they know this? Babies. They've done all this study on babies, and they know based on how much they have in their system and how well those vaccines work for babies. So we know all this.
Wow.
Cardiovascular disease, it's having a heart attack, boom, there it is. Affecting your growth, your learning behavior of all of your children. We don't give our children, artificial flavors and colors because we don't want them running around like crazy animals, but they do the same thing with PFAS. It's the same thing.
Oh.
It impacts their ability to grow, learn. It's hormone disrupting. So anything in your body, any type of process that needs to happen, that's a hormonal based process, your behavior is hormonally balanced. You know what I'm saying? Your ability to learn, what you can perceive, all of those things are based on hormones, and your hormones interacting in your body and things happening at a very specific time. And if they don't happen at a very specific time, things go haywire. PFAS is one of those things that can do that. And PFAS is also, your body thinks it's an androgen. So when it goes into your body thinks it's testosterone. So guess what happens to men when they have too much testosterone in their body? Guess what their bodies do? They shut it down. So if you're a man, too much androgen, what happens during these developmental times for little boys? And I have 3 little boys, and this scares the you-know-what out of me. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's hormonally active, that your body thinks is an androgen, that your body's going to respond to. Now look at some of this other stuff that it's linked to. Smaller penis size, low sperm count. Those types of things are based on, androgen. Those are all linked to PFAS. We also have chances of miscarriage. It increases miscarriages. It increases all of those things having to do with, having a baby. That's all this stuff. Lowers a woman's chance of getting pregnant the more PFAS she has in her. Also, it's a risk for allergies, asthma. It's the pot of all the stuff that we don't want, And then in addition to that, increase of kidney and testicular cancers. So that's the big pot that we have to work with. It's very similar to other endocrine disrupting chemicals, except it's persistent and worse. So that's why I focus on it. No one else likes to focus on it, but I do because I'm crazy like that. And again, knowing my background, you know why. So, yes, I feel like I've scared the you know what out of you. I'm going to tell you where it's going to be found. basically everywhere, but in a lot of places like cookware. So you want to avoid Teflon pans, any type of non-stick pan, I would just toss. Even the ceramic pans, because those are typically made of ceramic, which are linked to gut problems as well. Not as bad as PFAS, but just the non-stick cookware, we just don't even do that. Clothing. So you've got jackets, raincoats, stain-resistant clothing. Think about it, like your umbrellas, anything that beads off that water resistance. Those are the kind of things you do want to avoid. Carpet and flooring, carpeting, they don't have Stainmaster carpet. I don't know if they actually still do have that. They probably do. I don't know. But there's a lot of carpet that is sold today that's PFAS free. I know because I've been starting to test. So it used to be all the carpet. It's not all the carpet, but I'll tell you, it's all the padding. So if you get carpet, you can find PFAS free carpet, but it's hard to find the padding. So, floors, your flooring might be one of those places where you could be bringing it into your system, especially if it's older carpeting and it's breaking down. Food packaging, this is a really big one. The one thing that we say is really important is the best thing you can start doing right away is cook your food from scratch. I know we don't think about that, but even when we're organic eaters, the more somebody has to process your food in a factory, the more your food could be touching maybe a Teflon coated piece of equipment or something like that can get those types of things into your food. And so one of the things that we say is cook your food from scratch, just like grandma did, because that's going to be the best way to avoid all of the PFAS chemicals. Because I'm testing things like crazy, regular food and food that's highly processed. And the more processed it is, the more I find, regardless if it's organic or not. There's just something about the manufacturing. And the other thing is that I've actually contacted the Organic Trade Association. They were a client of mine for many years because I produced a big conference and all kinds of stuff that I'd done in the past. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, we've been doing a lot of testing of organic spaghetti sauce. And this was something we did a couple years ago. We tested like 60 spaghetti sauces. The only 4 brands that we found that had anything in them at the levels I was testing pretty high, were 4 organic brands. And so this is why I called the Organic Trade Association. And they basically told me, this is not our problem. This is the FDA's problem, because the FDA is the one that oversees the manufacturing and all of the indirect additives and all the packaging and all that stuff. We got la, 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 la. We don't want to hear it. I don't think that organic eaters feel that way about the organic industry. So anytime you can, just say, hey, organic's got to fix their PFAS issue. Just throw that out there because they know it.
Wow.
But they need to hear it more from the consumers before they're going to start like jumping at it. Car wax, snowboard wax, your drinking water. I'd always recommend you get a water filtration system, regardless of where you live, because the chances are they're not testing all of the chemicals that could be in your water. They're testing chemicals that they're mandated to test, which is a lot. But there is a lot more out there. So I just recommend people just go get a water filter regardless, because you don't know what you don't know, and what you don't know could hurt you. So we did that as well. In my area, we have perchlorate in the water supply, which is really bad for thyroid and all of those things. So we definitely recommend that. The other thing my advisors also recommend is to actually iodine and your salt is a good thing. So I know a lot of people go towards salts that are like more natural salts, but in my house, we have natural salt that has iodine in it, and it's called Sartanello. It's an Italian brand. So I do actually have a natural salt with iodine because I'm really concerned about, our thyroids, and I have a thyroid condition. So, I could keep going on and on. There's all kinds of things.
No, this is great. Let me ask. So this is so informative and so great. We discovered Mamavation during this huge moment a couple months ago that was the exposure of PFAS in Lululemon pants. It took over the internet, took over Instagram, TikTok. We quoted your research in an episode, and we also have tons of these pants.
I know.
So we're wondering.
You're not the only one, actually. I had this, my Lululemons were before they fixed the crotch part, you know, when you would bend over and you could see the sheer. Mine were not
Oh,
old.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember that phase. Yep.
I didn't throw them away. I was like, oh, whatever. How many times am I going to bend over like that? And I was always exercising around women. So I was like, this is not my problem. But anyways, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I hear
we're
what you're saying.
wondering, has Lululemon given a response?
No,
And then
not even
what do
anything.
you, nothing?
Wow.
Nothing.
That's sad.
Well, I mean, the truth is we don't know very much about this exposure. This exposure is not understood well. Okay. So if you think about it, so when I did all this testing, I was testing the pant area, and I was getting non-detects on most stuff. And then I just thought for a second, maybe I should test the crotch, because if I was a clothing company, I might put PFAS in the crotch just because I'm a girl, you know, there's smells, like whatever. So I started testing the crotch, and oh my gosh, that was like 45, I think it was 45% of the 40 something brands that I tested had something in the crotch area.
Wow.
And not necessarily on the pants. So it looked as if it was intentionally added, even though they were in lower levels, just fabric that was different or something, you know. So we don't understand the exposure. And I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of people are making a big deal about it, but I honestly think that the worst exposure was the sports bras, because we also did sports bras, and 65% of those sports bras were actually it was what we were finding it in was the fabric right next to the nipple. Now, I thought everyone was going to freak out about that. I didn't see the crotch in the yoga pants. And I'll tell you why the sports bras to me were more problematic. Okay, so when you wear these, you do have your underwear on. Most women are. I'm wearing underwear. If you don't, you may want to consider wearing underwear, so you at least have a couple barriers in between that. That would be my first recommendation. But we just don't know about the exposure. I mean, you got underwear on, you've got hair, maybe not, you know, and how much of this PFAS is getting in your skin? Well, we know through sweat that when you're sweating, yes, it gets into your skin a lot easier. And we know that based on studies that have been done with children in car seats. They sweat. And does the chemicals from the car seats get into them? It does. When they're sweating in that car seat, it does. And so the same thing would be assumed for you if you're sweating. But the sports bras are worse, because imagine this scenario, because this was my exact scenario. You know, you got some weight to work off after you have the baby, right? You've been eating for 9 months, right? And so, like, no judgment, whatever you got to do. Maybe it's 20 pounds, maybe it's 100 pounds, right? So you put the baby down for a nap and you go to work out. You put I used to do Tybo and Billy Blank. So I put in a Tybo video and I'd be like punching. And then the next thing you know, I hear the baby crying. I'm like, damn it, I didn't get my nap. I was going to have 40-minute workout, and it drives me nuts. I'm wearing a sports bra, and I'm wearing a sports bra that probably has PFAS right next to my nipple. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the baby, and as I'm sweating, I'm going to lift up my shirt and pop the baby right on my boob. And did I just expose the baby to PFAS?
I have done that scenario so many times, hundreds of times.
We don't understand the exposure. So the crotch, I believe, in my personal opinion, is a lower exposure than those sports bras. 65% of those sports bras, when I tested what was right next to the nipple, we're not talking the outside, we're talking the inside sheath. 65% of those bras had some indications of PFAS. That's where my brain is. And that's where I'm like, y'all are focusing on the wrong thing. I wanted to get that story out more than the other one, but people focused on the crotch story, which, I mean, I don't blame them. It is kind of like, wow.
Yeah. And Lululemon is such a well-known brand that I feel like everyone I know owns Lululemon pants. Whereas like the sports bras are probably different brands. I don't know if it was a Lululemon one. If it was, then that would also be like, whoa. I mean, that's where everybody goes for their exercise clothes.
We did not find PFAS in the Lululemon sports bra that we tested, luckily, but we did find it in others. So,
that's good.
Right.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean? And it's not always consistent, because the fabric that they're putting next to your nipple is different than the fabric that they're putting in your crotch. And I don't even know if it's made in the same manufacturing plant. So that, I mean, for the levels that we found, when it's under 100 parts per million, because I'm doing, maybe I'll just go through a little bit about my testing. So I told you there's 15,000 of these chemicals out there. It is impossible to identify all 15,000. Impossible. Why? There's not assays to do the testing. They can only identify 100 of these chemicals in a commercial lab. Now, if you're in a university lab like my advisors, you can identify up to 150. But that's about as much as you can find. And in fact, one of my advisors develops new methods for testing PFAS by, I know this is going to sound crazy, wrangling alligators out of lakes in South Carolina and anesthetizing them and taking their blood and their their flesh and testing it for PFAS. And he develops new ways of testing PFAS by monitoring it, looking at everything that I have, all of my investigations. And he's the one who says that this testing that I do is a great spot check. Okay, so we're going to go back with understanding what I'm doing. So PFAS has carbon and fluorine in it, and that's what they all have in common. When we do testing, we're using old-fashioned testing from like the 1950s, and we're looking for fluorine. We're looking for elemental fluorine. Why? Because that's what's in all of these PFAS chemicals, every single one. Now, is it possible to get other things in fluorine that are not PFAS? Yes. However, none of those things are things that you want to eat or put on your body, because they're things like, oh, I don't know, refrigeration chemicals or just nasty, nasty things. Oh, and there's also fluoride. And fluoride is also something that we want to avoid as well. We operate a second test if we get a hit on total fluorine, and we look at 10 parts per million, which is really, really high. And there's a reason why we test this high, because this is the only test that I have found where you can look at all of those 15,000 chemicals at once. And if you move to any other test, you lose the whole shebang. You won't be able to find all of them. You
lose sensitivity.
Well, it has to do because we're looking for monomers and we're looking for polymers at the same time. PFAS has polymers, which are the plastics, the Teflon, and polymers are made up of different monomers. So most of the time when you hear about PFAS, we're talking about monomers. We're looking about a single chemical like PFOA, PFOS, those types of things. But when we talk about Teflon, Teflon is a polymer. So it's different chemicals connected to each other on a chain. So we still want to find those chemicals. Why? Because that's the vast majority of what's approved in manufacturing. And when I've worked with brands, especially green beauty brands, that's the vast majority of what we're finding is fluorinated plastic, Teflon type chemicals. So if you're not looking for it, you're never going to find it. So that's why I do very simple elemental testing at 10 parts per million. If you have something at that level, that is really high, really high. So to give you an idea, so when I'm testing in the parts per million, that's like a drop in a pool. That's how small it is. But then water is safe, way smaller. So when you get down to the parts per billion, which are smaller, it's like a drop in an Olympic size pool. Okay? That's parts per billion. We're still not safe yet in terms of PFAS. We're not safe until we get to the parts per trillion. I think it's like 1 part per trillion. That is a drop in, Megan, you're going to have to tell me, is it 10 or 100 Olympic size pools? It's one of the two. One of the two. But I forgot offhand. It's a lot.
Oh my
so
gosh.
A tiny, tinny bitty drop of PFAS in, I don't know, 10 to 100 Olympic size pools. That's the safety level in water. So I'm testing at 1 drop in a regular pool. This is not a safe level. So when we're finding it, it's a problem. It's definitely not okay. And so I'm testing high because there's no other alternative right now. We are constrained on what type of testing we can do. There is other testing. Like, for instance, the green beauty industry totally disagrees with how I test them, which is, I find kind of funny, because they don't like the testing I'm doing. They prefer something called extractable organic fluorine, which sounds great. You can get down to the parts per billion, so you can go way farther down and find out more. But guess what you can't look at? You can't look at any of the polymers with extractable organic fluorine testing. So all of the issues that I found in green beauty, we're testing for that, but they don't like it when we test for that. They like this
course.
other test that doesn't show you any of these PTFE chemicals at all. Can't extract them. So they prefer that. So they argue and say that, yeah. So there's a lot
like
of
the measurement error. It works in their favor. That's funny. Wow.
I mean, this is my life, right? And so then they'll argue with me, but they're really arguing with my advisors. My advisors say this is fine, you know. So I do what my advisors tell me to do. I don't do what the brands tell me to do, because they would like me to pound sand and go away. So, and I'm definitely not doing that. So that's kind of how that works.
So I know assays are expensive to run. I used to run them for all the hormones on studies at Berkeley. How are you getting all this funding? It's amazing.
So I am mostly self-funded, mostly. So
wow.
most of what I do receive some donations, and we work with Environmental Health News. They are 501c3. So anybody who wants to donate can donate to Environmental Health News. And when you put your donation in, instead of dedicating it to a person, write Mamavation or PFAS testing or something like that, and that money will go directly to me. It will go directly to my testing. So there is that. So people do randomly donate, but the vast majority of it, and I would say 80% of it, is all me. And so what I do is it's just like what I normally do. I test things. I do investigations on all kinds of stuff. I put up the answers. And then when people go to Mamavation and they click, those clicks, when they buy things, that goes back to paying for our testing. So I pay myself and I pay for the testing at the same time. And so the way I look at it, it's like I own a business, and this is me investing in my business and investing in my community, you know, because I really care about what happens to my girls, and no one else is going to do this. That's what I realized. I'm like, nobody else wants to do this. I'm crazy. So I guess it's good. It's good that I'm crazy obsessed about these very specific chemicals, because I care enough to spend my own hard-earned money and buy these products and send them off to a lab and post this in public. I care that much. So
that's amazing.
That's how the vast majority of the money is. But then again, so Environmental Health News, if you want if also the other thing is we raise money in Mamavation too. So Mamavation in the past, before we worked with Environmental Health News, we were just raising money, and I was just doing testing, and it was just, you know, PayPal, send it to me by PayPal, and I was just paying for it. And yes, I'm a little bit in debt with this testing. And so this is just, you know, it's part of running a business, in my opinion, you know, and this is what I do. But not a lot of influencers do this kind of work. So it does seem really unique. But if you compared me to like an NGO, this is not unique. I act like I'm an NGO, but I'm not an NGO. We are for profit, but a lot of my profits go towards testing.
Okay. And for everyone listening, we're going to link the Mamavation site, of course, and we'll link everything else that Leah's mentioning here. So if you're feeling passionate about this, like we are while you're listening, you can hop onto our Instagram and check out those links where you can support.
Appreciate that, ladies. I really do. That's amazing.
Well, we would love to know more about some of the massive impacts you've had on the movement towards a greener planet. I read that you got target to ban, is it bisphenol?
Yeah, bisphenol, BPA. That was fun. You know, I work really closely with my advisory team. And so I have these amazing scientific advisors. And my main scientific advisor, you guys are going to love this story, Pete Myers. Now, Pete Myers has become like my second dad. And he's about the same age as my dad, and he loves nature like my dad. And so Pete Myers was the man that coined the phrase endocrine disrupting chemicals. We would not have this science if it wasn't for Pete. And that was him and a lady named Theo Colburn, who was a very eccentric older female scientist, discovered everything together, brought all of the scientists in the world together to discuss it, and created the science. And they wrote a book about it, and they're still working on it. Now, BPA is one of Pete's, well, also, by the way, we call Pete the Godfather, not because he's harming people, but because of what I know he's going to do to those chemical companies, you know? So we refer to him as the Godfather, as he rounds up all of his, you know, his scientist friends. And that's really Pete's, one of his biggest, I mean, he's a brilliant man, but the man is just the most amazing communicator, and he's the most amazing friend to all of these people who are doing all of this amazing work. And so they all come to Pete behind the scenes, and he introduces me to all of these amazing people. So that's how I'm able to have access to these highly prized, amazing scientists who work for us for free. They donate their time to me. I'm not paying them for their time. They're giving it freely because of what we're doing, and they love what we're doing. So Pete, what was I going to say? So Pete starts Endocrine Disrupting Chemicals, and Theo Colburn, God rest her soul, she passed away about 5 years ago. They wrote a book. And then, so Pete comes to me a couple years ago, it was like 2017. And he's like, Leah, you know what we've discovered? That the worst way that people are exposed to BPA and BPS is actually not through water bottles like it used to be, because it used to be water bottles. It's register receipts. And I'm like, what? So the vast majority of the receipts that you see have this kind of powder over the top of it. And if you keep them for more than a year, they start to turn purple. They're all the same. Now, the powder that is on top of these receipts is made of bisphenols, and the bisphenols is what changes color to print on your receipt. So the problem with this is most of the time when you have like a polycarbonate plastic that has BPA in it, some type of chemical reaction has to happen to expose you, like heat or like acid or high fat or something like that. And it will draw it out of the plastic into you. But in this case, there is no chemical reaction needed because that bisphenol is in powder form laying right on top of the paper. So as you're touching it, and if you're a woman or a child, you are getting a far greater exposure because your skin is thinner than a man's and a child is the thinnest. So touching that receipt paper is the highest level of bisphenols that a female is exposed to on a daily basis.
Wow. So just reject receipts. Just don't take them.
Just say no to receipts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of impossible for some people because some people have to produce them and save them and stuff like that. So like there's a couple of choices, you know, you can take a picture of it. There's apps you can do.
Gloves.
That's an option. There's gloves. There's also the trick if you're out. There's another trick you can do. You'll get half exposure, not full exposure, but the backside doesn't have the powder. There's probably powdered on it from it being in a wrap, but it won't be as much. So you can grab it from the back and just that way, right? But try not to stick these things in your purse. So what I've done is I have a Ziploc bag in my purse just for receipts. So it's not like touching everything else in my purse. And I'm a woman and I know that we all do this. We all stick those receipts in our purse, right? We're rummaging around. It's touching everything. Like just stop doing that. I'm telling you because Pete loves you. He loves women. He's got a daughter. He's an amazing man. He's very concerned about bisphenols with women and how much shopping that they do because they have done the science behind the scene and shared it with each other. And they know from science that this is a really bad exposure. So the absolute worst person to be exposed to is someone who's on a cash register who is pregnant with a female. If you are pregnant, because BPA is it's an estrogen mimicker. It's not an androgen mimicker. It's an estrogen mimicker. So BPA is worse for women, not as bad for men. It's not good for men, but it's way worse for women because it disrupts our natural processes just like it would for men if it was an androgen. So for women, these types of exposures can lead to having your period at 9 years old. So the worst person who could be touching this is someone who was doing, cash register at Target. And then the day after he said that, I went to Target and I saw one. She was pregnant. She was a cash register. And I'm not the crazy person who ran up to her. I didn't want to do that. I was just like, oh my God. So then I started going, we asked our audience, which we always do, where are you guys shopping? Because I want to know what places that you guys are all touching, so to speak. And when we asked, everybody had Target in common. So that's when we decided we were going to go after Target. So I'm trying to remember who I aligned with. We just basically got all the influencers together, and said, hey, we're going after Target. You want to help? And they're like, yay. And some of them are like, come on, Leah, I love Target. And I'm all like, it's just the paper. But we got about 50,000 signatures. We got 50,000 signatures pretty quickly too. And then we got a meeting with them. And so I sat in a meeting with Target and just told them exactly what was happening. Here's the funny thing that happened. And this was 2018. It's 2018, I had the meeting with them. They lied to me and said, we're not going to do anything you say. They literally said, nope, we're not doing it. Oh. But they lied to me because they did it within 6 months and fixed it and had it done and rolled out nationwide before 2020 hit. It was done.
Wow. Why would they
lie
about that?
No idea.
Oh.
No
Well,
idea.
that's reassuring to know that it was done.
Funny, they didn't want me to be able to take credit maybe or something like
I'm
that.
Oh,
thinking they wanted to roll that out themselves and say, hey, look at
Mhm.
us. We just removed this terrible chemical.
Right. Well, they never told
Oh.
their staff, because why would you tell your staff that you were exposing them to a toxic chemical for decades
mm,
and now we're
mhm.
not all of a sudden? So they didn't tell anybody either. We found out about it
Ah,
because of Mind the Store campaign. And so the Mind the Store campaign is working on all kinds of toxics with them. And that was one thing that they reported to the Mind the Store campaign, which boosted up their level to like an A. And they were like, yay, you're better, and so they took credit for it, but in a way that wasn't so public. It added to
Mm.
something.
oh,
It was kind of like, all right,
interesting.
whatever. I mean, they do what they got to do. I mean, you can't take these things personally, right? Because there's people involved. And so,
You were also named Mom of the Year by Shape magazine. So, congratulations. That's a huge honor. How was receiving this award? Were your kids so excited for you?
so they did a whole page on me and a couple other moms, and so it was in the news. It was in their magazine, and I have it.
Oh.
My kids are too small when it was happening to even understand. Like they were like,
Oh,
it's like a magazine, so when these things were happening, my kids were
Yeah.
tiny, my grandma didn't even understand what was happening, she's like,
Oh.
oh yeah. So I think I got
Oh.
the Shape award about 14 years ago. And you know what was crazy? That award, Bob Green, I was working a lot with Bob Green at the time, and he was the trainer for Oprah. And so he talked to Oprah
Oh.
about me, and Oprah sent me a signed book of hers. So she wrote a book, and she wrote
Oh.
all this
oh,
stuff.
wow.
Congratulations on being Mother of the Year. All of this, like I just got it, and I didn't expect it. And so, like a couple of weeks later, I was like, "Oh my god, I got a book from Oprah with like a sign." I'm like, "Wow, Oprah like wrote about me." That was the cool part. So that was my favorite part. But
Oh.
but I gotta say, Consumer Reports, that just that made me all warm and squishy inside. They gave me my own little, I'm the PFAS hunter, which is a perfect explanation of what I do and who I am and stuff. I
Oh,
always look
yes.
for things that are hidden. You know what I mean? And to be a hunter, that's fun.
Yes, that is so cool. I love how you've created the Mamavation community to be a judgment-free zone. So whether you're brand new to looking for less toxic options for your family or the greenest mom on the block, the community's for you. And you've done such an incredible job of simplifying the information when it can feel very overwhelming. Megan loves to say progress, not perfection. And that's something that I'm working on as well with regard to eliminating toxic items. So I just wanted to ask, if someone is brand new to this, other than joining the Mamavation community, which has been so helpful for me, what do you highly recommend that they would start at?
So the easiest thing to do is the concept of less is more. That's the easiest thing to do. Okay. So what do I mean? When you're making your meal, start cooking from scratch more. Less is more. You don't need everything done for you. The more you can do on your own, the more you can protect yourself from this chemical. So when you're talking about personal care products, you don't need that much. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the average woman wears on her face every day. It's something like 20 plus products that we're putting on our face on a daily basis. You don't need more than 6.
I had a couple follow-up questions before we get to takeaways. In the intro, you mentioned pans and floss. We know to stay away from certain things. What do you recommend to replace those things? Because I'm going to go do that right after this episode.
So if you go to mamavation.com and just put in dental floss into the thing, which I'm literally going to do right now because I do not remember all of the brands that we did.
Okay.
Radius is one that I'm going to add. I might not have that up by the time your people do it, but I will be adding Radius. People ask me that quite a bit, and it was a non-detect. But what I would do is do the dental floss, go to my site. There are a bunch of brands there's one brand in particular that is pure PTFE. That's Glide.
Oh, no.
And that's why I say dental floss, because most people I know are actually using Glide.
My husband uses Glide.
My husband did too. Don't feel bad.
Toss
We had
it.
to. That's one of the reasons why I did the dental study, because I was like, honey, and he's like, I'm not going to believe you until I'm like, all right, fine, I'll test it. And I continuously test. So like, anytime any of your audience wants me to test something, that I missed, you know, when I did an investigation, just reach out to me, say, hey, can you test this? If they can send me one that's already in the packaging and send it to me, it'll happen so much quicker. I take a lot of donations. And so like I'm testing things like uniforms. We have moms that are reaching out to me about uniforms. This isn't something I put in public yet, but they've reached out to me and they're like, can you test this? And I've tested uniform stuff. And
both our kids wear uniforms.
Land's End. Test that, please.
So there's like, you know, here's all the stuff. Yes. I'm working on it. But part of what I need, when I need help, it's because I don't know what you ladies are using. And if you can grab it and not use it, just your audience, buy something for me. You know what I'm saying? Buy something for me and send it to me in its packaging. And if it's part of something, I'll test it for you. Like, I love this.
I love this too. Is your address on the Mamavation website?
No, it's for my protection. So they'll have to reach out to me personally. And so I'm Mamavation on everything. So reach out to me, say, hey, you know, I heard you on the thing. And, you know, I have a question about this thing over here. I might've already tested it. And so that's the thing. People reach out to me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I already tested it. I'll let you know. You know what I mean? Or something like that. I can help.
Yeah. The Mamavation website has been so beneficial to me because I've always feel like I'm inching towards this more non-toxic home for my family. And when I found your website, I was like, amazing. Boom, 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 boom. Here's 10 things I can update. Throw out the old things, replace the new things. And it's like a weight was lifted and you made it so simple. So I just really appreciate that and wanted to say thank you and get that thank you in there because it's made something that feels overwhelming easy.
So you're telling me that I've empowered you.
Yes.
That's my goal.
Yes,
I've empowered you.
Great.
That is my goal.
Yeah.
That's the name of this episode, by the way. Empower.
Yay. Well, Leah, thank you so much. This has been so enlightening for us, and I know it will be for our listeners as well. We have a few takeaways, and feel free to clarify this, but number one is it's never too late to begin removing toxic items from your home. Number two, remember that consumers can help drive the green progression in the market by their purchasing power. Follow Leah's research to make better educated purchases for your family and let your money do the talking. Okay, and number three, join the Mamavation community.
Yay! Yes! Yay! Thank you, Leah, so much for being here. That's all for this episode of Platinum Perspective. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Tune in every week for more beauty, psychology, and travel. Check out our Instagram for all the mentions that Leah shared with us and to join her Instagram. And please tell your friends. Rate, like, and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.